They were feared before they were ever understood. Long before anyone outside their valley knew their names, before rumors traveled beyond the ridgelines, before officials ever opened dusty files and whispered theories, Martha and Eliza Blackwood were already legends inside their own home. In the summer of 1923, when much of America danced to jazz records and embraced modern life, there existed a place in eastern Kentucky where time moved differently. Slow. Heavy. Reluctant. Deep within the fog-choked folds of Clay County, tucked between steep Appalachian ridges that swallowed sunlight before evening could properly begin, lay a forgotten hollow. Roads barely reached it. Maps barely acknowledged it. And outsiders almost never entered it. Here, coal dust settled on every surface. Wind whispered through skeletal trees. And silence pressed down like a living thing. This was Blackwood land. 40 acres of isolation, owned and occupied by the same family for 3 generations. No neighbors close enough to matter. No visitors brave enough to linger. Just mountains, mist, and blood. For decades, the Blackwoods lived apart from the world. They grew their own food. Treated their own wounds. Solved their own problems. And followed their own rules. Rules that no longer matched the rest of society. While cities built schools and hospitals, the hollow kept traditions that traced back to the first settlers, customs passed down without question. Some were harmless. Others were not. Historian Margaret Connolly would later describe it simply. When people live cut off long enough, they stop measuring themselves against the outside world. Margaret's grandmother had been the midwife who first witnessed what happened inside that cabin. And she never forgot it. Records uncovered decades later revealed something troubling about the Blackwood lineage. It had folded inward. Again. And again. Isaiah Blackwood, born in 1862, married his first cousin, Sarah. Their son Thomas married his mother's niece. That pattern continued quietly, unquestioned, unchallenged, tightening the family bloodline like a slowly closing fist. By the early 1900s, Thomas and his wife Emma lived in a 2-room cabin with her parents. 3 generations pressed together. Thin walls. No privacy. No escape. Everyone saw everything. Heard everything. Felt everything. The family left the hollow only twice a year to buy supplies. Otherwise, the world might as well not exist. When Emma became pregnant in late 1904, fear crept into the cabin. Not excitement. Not hope. Fear. Her own mother had given birth to 3 children before her, each with severe disabilities. None had lived past 5 years old. Thomas himself walked with a limp. One arm larger than the other. Similar deformities marked his brother and uncles. Illness was common in mountain families. But this was different. Doctors would later confirm it. This wasn't bad luck. It was inheritance. On August 17, 1905, as thunder rolled across the ridges and rain hammered the tin roof, Emma went into labor. Local folklore would later say the storm was a warning. Midwife Elizabeth Connolly arrived just before midnight. Her journal still exists. 2 female infants born this evening. Unusual appearance. Identical in their differences. Misshapen skulls. Widely spaced eyes. Unnatural coloring. She wrote that Thomas left the cabin when he saw them. Emma refused to look. The grandmother whispered they was marked. Anne Elizabeth wrote one final line that night. I fear for their survival. But they survived. Against expectation. Against probability. Against everything. They were named Martha and Eliza. And they lived. Slowly, strangely, they grew. By age 3, neither had spoken a single word. Yet they communicated constantly. With gestures. With glances. With sounds no one else understood. Their bodies developed unevenly. Faces asymmetrical. Movements sharp, sudden, unpredictable. One shoulder higher. One jaw lower. one eye drifting. Mirror images, warped. The family hid them. Curtains drawn. Doors locked. Visitors turned away. The hollow grew quieter. But secrets never stay buried. Whispers began. Hunters claimed to see two pale figures behind windows. Children swore they heard strange laughter at night. Travelers avoided the trail that passed near the cabin. And slowly, the Blackwoods withdrew even further from the world. By the time Martha and Eliza reached childhood, their presence dominated the home. They moved together. Stood together. Sat together. Sometimes they would remain perfectly still for hours, staring at nothing. Other times, they erupted into sudden fits, laughter, sobbing, shrill cries that echoed through the trees. Most disturbing of all. When angered, they were strong. Stronger than anyone expected. Stronger than anyone could explain. By 1918, when influenza swept through even the most remote valleys, the twins were 13. And the disease took their mother. Emma Blackwood died in October. With her death, the last fragile balance inside the cabin collapsed. She had been the only one who could calm them. The only one who dared touch them. The only one who still tried to see daughters instead of omens. Now, Thomas was alone. And the hollow began to change. Thomas Blackwood, already a man of few words, sank deeper into silence after Emma's death. The whiskey jug became his only companion. The cabin, once crowded with the faint hum of human life, grew heavier with absence and tension. Every creak of floorboards, every sigh of wind through the ridges seemed magnified. The twins' presence, silent, synchronized, watchful, filled the space like a living shadow. Neighbors noticed. Jerem Collins, whose father ran the nearest general store, remembered seeing Thomas emerge more often, his eyes hollow, hands shaking, voice barely audible. He would purchase twice the usual supplies, mention the girls, and retreat without explanation. No one dared pry. Everyone understood that certain doors were meant to stay closed. Winter 1919 to 1920 was merciless. Snow piled thick along the slopes, isolating the cabin for months. When Thomas finally ventured out in February, the lines on his face were sharper. A deep gash marred his left cheek, crudely stitched and festering. He muttered about ice, but his glance betrayed something else, a constant, restless vigilance. Behind him, in the hollow, Martha and Eliza were now approaching 15, their bodies growing, yet minds strangely childlike. Their coordination had improved, but their behavior had grown more unpredictable. Words were rare, gestures frequent. The twins spoke mostly to each other in a private language of clicks, hums, and subtle glances. Thomas's concern was not the language itself, but their awareness. They knew they were different. And they resented him. Sometimes, his possessions would appear broken, scattered in precise, almost ritualistic patterns. Objects rearranged as though the cabin itself had become their canvas, and their judgment, exacting. In April 1920, a rare intrusion occurred. Dr. James Harland, a local physician, was summoned to examine the girls. The family's isolation made the visit unusual, but Thomas's growing concern outweighed his fear of outsiders. Dr. Harland's diary, preserved decades later, offers a clinical glimpse into the unnerving reality. Patient T. Blackwood presented with laceration requiring resuturing. Upon inquiry, evasive answers provided. Twin subjects display clear signs of genetic abnormalities, consistent with recessive trait manifestation. Cranial asymmetry, irregular dentition with extra incisors. Spinal curvature pronounced. Cognitive assessment limited due to communication barriers. Most notable, synchronized movements and vocalizations. When one agitates, the other follows within seconds. Sleep positions identical, awakenings simultaneous. Father refuses institutional evaluation. 3 subsequent visits revealed worsening conditions. Bruises on Thomas suggested escalating violence, the twins' agitation grew. The cabin itself seemed modified for containment, reinforced doors, partitioned rooms, Thomas explaining, matter-of-factly, it was for when they get their spells. By summer 1921, Clay County began whispering rumors. Hunters spoke of screams echoing from Blackwood Hollow. Odd arrangements of stones, animal bones, and other inexplicable symbols littered the woods. Local pastor Reverend Abernathy attempted to intervene, only to be rebuffed at gunpoint. He later told his congregation of a fear unlike any he had ever known, not for himself, but for what he had witnessed in the girls. The first documented outsider encounter occurred that October. Samuel Green, a hunter tracking a wounded deer, stumbled near the cabin. His sworn statement to the sheriff reads, "Soft crying behind the cabin drew me near. I saw them, two young women in faded dresses, moving perfectly in unison. Hands worked together on something I couldn't identify. Their faces, not entirely human. Eyes too wide, jaws uneven, identical. When they turned, their expressions were not fear, not surprise, but hunger. They rose, stepped toward me, and I ran. I swear they followed almost a mile, moving with ease that didn't match their forms." Sheriff William Dawson investigated. Thomas claimed the twins were visiting relatives, an obvious lie. Windows were barred. Interior walls bore deep scratch marks. Outside, the world seemed normal, but inside, the cabin had become a theater of fear and obsession. Winter 1921 to 1922 brought a tense quiet. Thomas appeared in town more frequently, buying chains, locks, and sedatives. Questions were deflected. The hollow remained sealed, the twins' presence dominating the household. Thomas's journal, discovered later in 1923, details the chilling progression. November 18, 1921, they watch me constantly, even in sleep. Last night, standing at the foot of my bed, holding hands, silent. When I lit the lamp, they smiled in unison and returned to their room. I reinforced their door with a second lock. December 25, 1921, small gifts for Christmas. Martha pleased with ribbon. Eliza reached, Martha's expression changed instantly. They communicate without words. By evening, shredded the ribbon into a face. My face. January 10, 1922, sounds at night less human. Scratch marks on ceiling. How they reached so high, I cannot understand. February 3, 1922, refused food for 3 days, then consumed an entire week's provisions. Strength grows, mine wanes. I fear sleep. March 15, 1922, Eliza spoke clearly for first time in months, "We know what you did to Mother." Martha nodded. Spring arrived. Thomas vanished from public view. Hair white at 42. Eyes haunted. He spoke of selling and moving west, but no action followed. Then, in May, a rare visitor crossed the threshold. Frederick Powell, a traveling Bible salesman, ignored local warnings and approached the Blackwood property. Miraculously, Thomas invited him inside, the first outsider allowed in over a year. What Powell witnessed would later fuel speculation for decades: a sparse interior, a reinforced door separating the main room from a bedroom, occasional scratching and whispered sounds from behind it. Thomas's eyes darted toward the door each time. The girls, Powell was told, were resting. Yet their presence filled the house like a shadow. When presented with a Bible, Martha and Eliza accepted it in perfect unison, fingers touching Powell's simultaneously. One whispered, "The blood remembers," and the other nodded. By the end of Powell's 2-day visit, he had glimpsed what few outsiders ever would: twins identical in movement and appearance, abnormalities pronounced yet possessed of an uncanny grace. Their father, desperate for company, attempted conversation, but all attention remained on the twins. Every gesture, every glance, a measured, synchronized dance of something wholly unfamiliar. The Hollow had become its own world, where human laws no longer applied, and the Blackwood legacy, entirely shaped by blood, isolation, and secrecy, loomed like a living entity. By late 1922, Thomas Blackwood had become a ghost long before he ever disappeared. When he appeared in town that December, shopkeepers barely recognized him. His frame had thinned to bone and fabric. His hands trembled constantly. His once dark hair had turned entirely white, as if age had been compressed into a single, brutal year. He purchased enormous quantities of medicine, canned food, tools, rope, and preservatives. When the storekeeper asked if he was preparing for winter, Thomas hesitated. "They'll be 18 come August," he whispered. "Everything changes then. It's the family way." No one knew what he meant. No one asked. That was the last time Thomas Blackwood was seen alive. Winter tightened its grip on Clay County in early 1923. Snow buried the ridges. Streams froze. Trails vanished. And the Blackwood cabin fell silent. No smoke rose from its chimney. No footprints appeared in the snow. No purchases were made in town. By March, hunters began reporting something strange. The forest around the property had gone quiet. No deer. No birds. No insects. Even the wind seemed to avoid the place. Sheriff William Dawson, already unsettled by months of rumors and Thomas's disappearance, organized a small investigative party in early April. With him were Deputy James Foster, Dr. Harland, and 2 experienced woodsmen. They approached the property on April 7, 1923. At 10:30 in the morning, under a pale spring sky, they reached the clearing. What they found did not resemble abandonment. It resembled aftermath. The livestock pens were empty. Fences sagged. Debris from winter storms lay scattered like discarded bones. The front door hung slightly open. Inside, the cabin was chaos. Furniture overturned. Dishes shattered. Personal belongings strewn across the floor. Deep impact marks scarred the walls, as though heavy objects had been hurled repeatedly. In the center of the main room, they discovered Thomas's journal. Its final entries dated to late March. The handwriting grew jagged. Sentences fragmented. References appeared again and again to August. To birthdays. To the culmination. No human remains were found on the main floor. Then Deputy Foster noticed the trapdoor. It lay partially hidden beneath a rug. When they lifted it, cold air rushed upward. The cellar smelled of rotten iron. Inside, they found evidence of prolonged habitation. Blankets. Candles. Preserved food. Crude furniture. And the walls. Every surface was covered. Drawings. Symbols. Figures rendered in dark, organic material. Dr. Harland would later identify it as blood. At the far end lay what remained of Thomas Blackwood. His body was in advanced decomposition. Clothing and personal effects confirmed his identity. Preliminary examination suggested multiple traumatic injuries. Not chaotic. Not random. Methodical. Certain organs and tissues had been removed with unsettling precision. No sign of Martha. No sign of Eliza. The official report was restrained. Measured. Careful. But privately, the men spoke of what they could not write. The drawings depicted generations of Blackwoods, each more distorted than the last. Faces warped. Limbs twisted. Spines curved. At the center, Martha and Eliza were drawn larger than all others, surrounded by symbols resembling halos. A massive circular diagram dominated one wall. It resembled a family tree whose branches folded back into themselves. No one present could decipher the script that surrounded it. Search parties combed the woods for months. Nothing. No tracks. No clothing. No graves. Only silence. Then came the sightings. In May 1923, a church in neighboring Leslie County reported 2 young women entering during Sunday service. They walked down the aisle in synchronized steps, speaking softly in an unknown language. Congregants fled in terror. In June, miners in Bell County described 2 figures watching from the tree line for 3 days before vanishing overnight. One worker claimed they had spoken to him. The deeper line needs new blood. As August 17 approached, the twins' 18th birthday, Sheriff Dawson established patrols around the abandoned property. He believed, for reasons he never fully explained, that they might return. On the eve of their birthday, a violent storm swept through Clay County. Lightning split the sky. Rain fell in sheets. Wind tore through the hollows. Sometime after midnight, lightning struck the old cabin. Flames engulfed it. Despite the downpour, the structure burned completely. By dawn, nothing remained but charred beams and blackened stone. That same night, 18 miles away, clerks at the county office discovered something else. All Blackwood records were gone. Birth certificates. Marriage licenses. Property deeds. Every document. The file cabinet showed no signs of forced entry. They had been opened. Emptied. Carefully. Dr. Harlan's final note, dated August 20, 1923, reflected his growing dread. The progression of abnormality suggests more than recessive traits. The precision of recent events implies inherited behavior as much as inherited form. The question is not merely where they have gone, but whether they understand enough to continue the pattern. By autumn, the case was officially listed as unresolved. Locally, it was already legend. Parents warned children away from the hollow. Hunters avoided the ridges. Travelers took longer routes. The Blackwood land was left untouched. Grass refused to grow. Animals refused to cross. And somewhere beyond maps and records, Martha and Eliza had disappeared into the mountains, carrying with them a legacy no fire could erase. For nearly a decade after the fire, Martha and Eliza Blackwood existed only as whispers. No official sightings. No confirmed evidence. No physical trace. Yet across Appalachia, stories began surfacing, quietly at first, shared between neighbors and hunters, whispered at kitchen tables after dark. Two identical women. Moving as one. Watching from trees. Asking questions no strangers should ask. Between 1923 and 1932, 7 children and 3 young adults vanished from isolated communities in Kentucky, West Virginia, and Tennessee. Each disappearance followed the same unsettling pattern. A brief encounter. A feeling of being studied. A conversation focused on family history. Then, absence. Local sheriffs treated each case as unrelated. Different counties. Different states. Different years. No central authority connected them. Until Detective Michael Collins. In 1937, Collins began reviewing cold cases involving missing persons from rural mountain settlements. What he found disturbed him. Every victim came from a lineage that had lived in the region for generations. Most belonged to families where cousin marriages were historically common. Isolation. Intermarriage. Repetition. The same ingredients that had shaped the Blackwoods. Collins traced reported sightings on a map. A wandering pattern emerged. Like ripples spreading outward from Clay County. In his private notes, he wrote, "They are selecting. Not randomly. Deliberately." The most chilling discovery came from West Virginia. Hospital records dated May 1927 documented the birth of identical twin girls. The mother identified herself as Martha Blackwood. Nurses described her as presenting with severe congenital abnormalities. An identical sister waited just outside the delivery room. Within hours of the birth, both women and the infants vanished. No forwarding address. No records. No explanation. The newborns were noted to be unusually alert. Marked by identical birthmarks on their left shoulders. Collins believed the twins had begun again. By 1932, sightings abruptly stopped. No more reports. No more encounters. No more disappearances. In his final file, Collins wrote, "M and E Blackwood appear to have completed their purpose. The pattern suggests a controlled genetic continuation." The case went dormant. But it did not end. In 1952, a home health nurse visiting an elderly woman in southern Ohio made a disturbing discovery. Photographs. Old, faded images. Martha and Eliza. Unmistakable. Beside them lay a journal written in the same strange script found in the Blackwood cellar, mixed with English phrases. The deepening of the line. The fifth generation. The culmination approaches. When questioned, the woman claimed to be a distant cousin. I watched over the special ones, she said calmly. Their daughters continued the work. She died weeks later. No further explanation was ever recorded. In the 1970s, renewed scientific interest led to genetic testing of preserved Blackwood blood samples. Dr. Eleanor Richards of Johns Hopkins published a limited study. Her findings shocked even skeptical colleagues. The Blackwood line showed accelerated mutation rates. Not random. Targeted. Neurological development. Physical maturation. Twin synchronization. Empathic bonding. Richards wrote, while most consanguineous relationships intensify harmful traits, this family developed a novel genetic expression. Physical abnormalities coincided with enhanced neurological integration. In simpler terms, their deformities may have been the cost of something else. Something emerging. Her research was dismissed. Too speculative. Too disturbing. Too close to myth. But her final conclusion remained. If continued, these mutations could produce individuals with capabilities beyond typical human parameters. The Blackwood case was officially closed in 1955. Detective Collins retired. Files were archived. The twins, if alive, would be elderly. Their descendants, if real, were untraceable. Yet rumors never stopped. Hikers spoke of abandoned campsites in the Smokies containing strange journals. Forest rangers reported finding symbols carved into trees. Occasional sightings of identical women in remote valleys surfaced, always unconfirmed, always dismissed. The last credible report came in 1998. A ranger discovered notebooks written in the same distinctive script. They were sent to an FBI office in Knoxville. They were lost in transit. No copies exist. Today, the former Blackwood property remains undeveloped. The land reverted to the county. No one has claimed it. Local residents avoid it. They say crops won't grow there. Animals refuse to cross it. Even insects seem absent. Standing on that soil, people describe a strange sensation. Like being watched. Like being measured. Like being remembered. Dr. Harlan's final journal entry, written shortly before his death in 1965, offers the most haunting perspective. Some bloodlines, once turned inward, do not collapse. They transform. Not toward extinction, but toward something we lack the language to describe. The Blackwood twins were not the conclusion. They were the chrysalis. If that is true, then somewhere, hidden among forgotten valleys and nameless ridges, something born from that hollow may still be walking. Watching. Learning. Waiting. Because in the mountains, nothing is ever truly lost. And some bloodlines never forget.